Hi, I'm Jade and I wanted to do an update video on my OCD recovery journey. I did one a few months ago. You may recognise me from other videos I've done in the past. I wanted to do another one because I feel like every few months it's like a new shift and I arrive at a new place. And so I thought I'd share a bit about what that's been like with you. Hopefully it will give you some hope if you're in a difficult place. I know for myself that my OCD was very extreme and very debilitating and definitely took over my life many a time, for years on end actually. So this is going to be a bit about where I was, how difficult it was, just so that you can feel heard, hopefully, and relate to what I went through. And then I'll talk about what I did, and then I'll talk about how different things are now, as well as the stages that I went through, so that maybe you can resonate if you're at a certain point in your own journey. The big thing to say is that I consider myself recovered now from OCD, and I really want to cover why I'm not saying I'm cured of OCD, because there isn't a known cure for OCD. And what I perceive to be the difference between cures and recovery, and why they're different, but not necessarily. That doesn't mean that in being recovered from OCD that you're settling for any sort of difficult time with your OCD. So I'll explain for myself how that's been. But the main thing to say is, just in a nutshell, at my worst, OCD was, it completely consumed my life. And now it feels, I don't forget I've got it, but it's got no power over me anymore. So I'll notice it doing its little thing, but there aren't reactions anymore, so it doesn't affect my day. I think the last time I was triggered was probably about 6 months ago. By triggered, I mean that I felt a bit uncomfortable about a scenario, but it was sort of disarmed quite quickly, because I quickly could realise, well, this doesn't need to have any power over me. And I had given birth 3 days earlier, so I think I put a lot of it down to hormones as well. So in a nutshell, it just shows, yeah, how far I've come. And also, I guess the key point is just about how much work had to go into it, so I will talk about that. So anyway, for anyone who hasn't watched my videos before, I'm 34 years old now. I've got 2 children, and from ever since I can remember, I've had OCD. It hit me fairly hard when I was about 8, with natural disasters, being utterly terrified of war, because I think that was big on the media at the time. So if I saw anything about war or hurricanes or volcanoes, anything like that, my body would just shut down. I wouldn't be able to eat from anxiety, and I'd feel completely trapped. And those symptoms have been the same for me throughout my life with OCD. If ever anything that's triggered me, that's always been my response, is just complete body shut down, being sick, not being able to eat, nausea, feeling completely trapped, like can't get out, need to get out, trapped in my own head, trapped in the world. Often is how I would feel, I'd feel like, get me out, how do I get out? So it was really scary as an 8-year-old, but I don't think it was till I was maybe like 14, 15 when like a sort of false memory, real event type OCD really hit me. I remember just having an intrusive thought at age about 14, 15, and I've said this before, thinking like, this is it now, life will never be the same. I'm thinking, you know, I would just give anything to go back to 3 minutes ago before this happened, because I can't see a way out of this. So from that point, I think I spent about 6 months at that age not eating, just like shaking uncontrollably. I would just sit in the bathroom like shaking and sweating and try and go to sleep. So sleep was my only escape. But I suppose it comes into your dreams as well, so that wasn't fun. I got seriously into athletics as a teenager. I was competing as a runner. So I wonder if, because I had a few years where OCD was always there, and really terrifying, but it did give me a couple of years with it in the background. I wonder if it's because I was on such an intensive training schedule that those endorphins maybe helped me a little bit. I don't know. Or maybe I was able to push things to the back of my mind. I remember distraction was a big part of my coping mechanism, but it never left. It was that strange feeling, I don't know if you've had this, probably have, where even if you have fun for a few seconds, your brain's like, you shouldn't be having fun. You know what's going, you know these thoughts are there. You can't run from who you are. And that was just always there, sometimes to high degrees, sometimes to lesser degrees. So I think I just learned to coexist with it. And then once I got to be a later teen, I just like alcohol got involved. I'd be like out with my friends, like partying. And I think having those first few drinks, I remember thinking, right, even subconsciously, because I didn't know I had OCD, but like if I just don't see any triggers all day, I didn't know the word trigger, just avoid everything, anything that's going to set off my brain, just avoid it all day, get those first few drinks down me, and then I'll have a great time. And then I'd wake up in the morning, it all just hit me. So it was really nasty. So yeah, from age 14 till about age 22, that was just constant. But then it got worse. It was almost like the avoidance of my fears had gotten to the point where the world just got so small. And I was thinking about this the other day because I've never had physical outward compulsions. They're obviously no different than mental compulsions, but I've never had outward facing compulsions. So when I would hear of people saying they couldn't live with contamination OCD, or they couldn't leave their room because of the danger and how it felt as a threat, I suppose because I didn't get to that point, I always thought, oh, maybe mine wasn't that bad. But when I look back, I feel like my life was like walking around with a box around me that kind of came with me. So I was sort of trapped in this box because I couldn't go anywhere near triggers. So if, say, for example, a school was a trigger for me, I would take a longer route so that I would avoid that school day on end. And my day was planned to like absolute accuracy so that I would never encounter a trigger. So it got to the point where it was so bad where what I could watch on TV was very limited. Adverts, I had to turn the telly off for adverts because in case I saw a trigger. If I was out walking, I remember once I saw a poster and there was a trigger on there, and I ran home and I was sick in bed for 3 full days just from seeing a poster. So I'd actually managed to avoid real life triggers so well that it was getting to the point where even if I saw an image related to a trigger, if I was in a restaurant and heard a word, just a key word that would take me to a trigger, I would literally have to leave for being sick. And I would always convince myself, oh, I've got a stomach bug, or I'm just ill, or and so I've recently been reflecting on just how bad it was. And because I think when you're in the depths of the suffering, you don't actually want to believe that it's that bad because you want to be okay. And that's why we hide it as well, I think, is because when people say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to come out for food? Or why don't you want to come to this barbecue? Why don't you want to do this? Food is always really scary for me because when I would be triggered, because my body would just freak out, the thought of food passing my lips was like just terrifying because I knew I'd be sick. So it was almost like a fear of fear then. So it got really bad. I think I used to go months on end without seeing a real life trigger. I was really got quite clever with it. And so that's when life got really bad. By the age of 24, I was in a very bad place. It was almost like everything's going to come tumbling down any second. You are not going to be able to keep this up any longer. You know, I'd been avoiding meals. I'd been working 60 hours. If I was in the office working, I felt like I was safe because my brain was preoccupied. I didn't have to worry about what I was going to see because everything was expected. I actually remembered recently that my boss told me off. He said, you've got 30 days annual leave. You haven't taken a day off in nearly a year. Because I didn't, if I went on holiday, it was the worst experience of my life going on holiday because you couldn't stay away from triggers. So I do anything I could to stay away from anything like that. And I'm only going into detail like this because I think sometimes because I'm doing so well now, it's not necessarily apparent just how bad I was. And I can't quite believe it. It's almost like part of the recovery process was coming to terms with how bad it was. And what's so weird as well is just how invisible it is. Like, if I were to say to people who aren't very close to me, oh, you know, I was really unwell from, well, my whole life, but particularly from 2011 was a horrific year. 2011 to 2016, 17 were really bad years. They'd be like, what do you mean? What was wrong? You seemed fine. And that, it's so weird, isn't it? And I don't think all of that is stigma. I think that coping is pretending it's okay. And I think that stunted my recovery journey for a long time, was once the major trigger has passed and you're not isolated in your bedroom, just binge watching TV to get through the day anymore. You sort of just want to get on with life and you don't want to talk about it and you don't want to be reminded because it's only going to trigger you again. So what did I do? I had a really bad low point, age 25, and I went for talking therapy, which I felt at the time maybe was helping me, but it definitely wasn't. It was definitely making me worse because it was a lot of there's no diagnosis of OCD at this point, by the way. So I'm 25, had it my whole life. OCD wasn't mentioned once. It was talking therapy. So I'd selected a wrong therapist. Obviously, CBT therapy is the sort of the standard for OCD to begin with. So I was in the wrong therapy. But I suppose talking about things was a good thing, you know, getting things off my chest. The problem is it was sort of analysing the thoughts and trying to work them out and trying to discuss with me the content of them to find out what they said about me, and maybe it was linked to my childhood. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of difficulty that followed that. And then when I had my first daughter, there was another, probably my worst period with OCD. I had this new beautiful baby and I just felt like I was trapped behind glass trying to get at her because there was just nothing but terror there from the moment she was born. And I was just utterly consumed with it every waking minute. It started going into my dreams as well, so I didn't even have a break when I was sleeping. I was very sick at that point, and I've talked about that before, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. If there's lots of videos I've done on that. But the point is, I had been having CBT therapy at that point, so it had helped me a lot. I was aware of OCD. Now that's a big first step in the journey, isn't it? When you realise, oh wow, there's other people like this, I've got OCD. So that was the first level, and it helped me. It took 50% of the suffering away pretty much overnight. And then I moved on to what I'd called next level, which was just using some mindfulness. Did help me because it sort of settled me and stopped me being so frantic. Doing a few exposures, unfortunately, and there are incredible OCD CBT specialists in the world. Unfortunately, perhaps the one I was with, who was incredible as a therapist, it wasn't quite, I don't think, her area of expertise. So I didn't make as much progress as I could have, but I did make a lot. So just facing my fears took away a little bit more of those, of the edge of it. And just understanding it's OCD. But I did fall into a trap then of constantly saying to myself, it's not me, it's my OCD. This is not who I am. This is just OCD. Just remember their thoughts. You know, this is not who I am. This is not what I want. This is the opposite of what I want. And I kept reading articles like every other day or so that was like, oh, these are the symptoms of OCD, because it reminded me, oh, it's OCD. It's not real. So that was quite compulsive. Obviously, the first few times reading that material was great for educating me, because I could learn, right, actually, no, once and for all, you know, like, this is a disorder. There isn't something fundamentally wrong with me. But unfortunately, after that, given the nature of our brains being quite obsessive, it's very easy to become a compulsion, and it did for me, definitely. And then this is at the point where I was what I would say coasting. So I wasn't like highly anxious every second of the day. I wasn't like throwing up every second of the day. I wasn't having panic attacks 5 times a day. And I was getting to the point where I thought, maybe this is it. Like, maybe this is the best it's going to be. So I just kept crying all the time because it just felt really sad. It was almost like oh wow, just telling myself it's OCD, like realise it was OCD. I thought, that's it, I'm cured now. It's going to go away because I know it's OCD. So surely it's just going to lift now because I know. But it didn't. And I was like, oh no, this is wearing off. I'm not as ill as I was, but this is wearing off. And I know that it's wrong to keep reading these articles over and over and over. I don't really know why. And whenever I go to therapy, it's just sort of, and I'm not sort of bad mouthing my therapy that I had, because it was really wonderful and it helped me in lots of areas of life, not just with the OCD, but we'd kind of got to where I could get to with it. And I've said it before, but that's at the point where I found Robert Bray, OCD Recovery. Obviously I've worked with Rob, but that's why I'm doing this video. And it felt like, or it was, the missing piece. So I'd done lots of exposures and they'd done wonders. I'd done, lots of uncertainty and all those things, and it had worked a lot. But what I'm trying to say is that another 2 years later, I can see really clearly that I was nowhere near recovery at that point. And I suppose my message of hope to you is that there is so much more ahead if you want to keep working at it, and it takes a lot of work, and you will doubt yourself and you'll doubt the process. It really started off with this idea of unconditional self-acceptance. So when I gave my fears to Rob, black and white, the first thing that he said was, and a lot of us guys who are in contact now in the OCD recovery community and WhatsApp groups, we really say this to each other a lot, why would that be so scary? And that, for me, has been the question that has gotten me to recovery eventually. Because in OCD, we like to explain the whole scenario. That, look, this is the thought and that's what happened, and I don't think it's this, I do think it's that. And really, why would that be so scary if it was true? And that sounds so ridiculous and terrifying at first. But when you start to learn more about Albert Ellis and his approach with unconditional self, life and other acceptance, you realise it's a psychology that is commonly used in the therapy world. So it worked really well for what I was doing, and it is for many others. It was more about disarming OCD at the root. So rather than, we're not fighting thoughts, we're fighting the core fears associated with the thoughts. So for example, how I would describe how it feels now, and I'm sorry, this is really probably rubbish, but I really like giving examples to demonstrate how it feels. And just to highlight that I am not talking about fighting thoughts here, I'm talking about fighting with OCD. So I said earlier in the video, there isn't a known cure to OCD. So I don't consider myself to be cured from OCD, but I do consider myself recovered. And I just want to explain how that feels with this example. I hope it makes sense. So when I first was suffering with OCD, imagine if I was like, is it jousting? Yeah, with, like, in a sword fight, let's say, in a sword fight with OCD. And I haven't even got the strength to fight back. I am literally just like, you're attacking me, like, let's call it a martial art. You're attacking me. I haven't even got the strength to stand up to you right now. Like, you win. My God, you win. I'm not even fighting you. Let me just lay here safely and you just stay over there and I'm not fighting you. Like, do your thing. And if ever I went to sit up, don't hurt me. I know my place. That's how it felt, right? And then as I started to get a little bit better with a bit of CBT and exposures and leaving the thoughts alone and uncertainty and all that stuff that is like really important with OCD recovery as part of the journey, I started to feel like I had the tools to like fight back a bit. And I don't mean fighting it in literal sense. I know we're not here to fight it. We need to leave things be. But I'm talking about how it feels for me, how this feels. I was able to like fight back each time it attacked. So if a trigger was thrown up, I could be like, yeah, I know what you're onto. I know what you're doing. And I've got all the tools. And that's how I started to feel. But it was still attacking me. and I was still having to engage with, okay, I know you're there and this is what I'm going to do about it. Okay, let me try and get on with my day. Let me just let you be there and get on with my day. And I'm anxious in the background and you don't have control over me. I was still in that place where where OCD was part of my life. So even though it wasn't kicking me to the ground, I was like was like fighting and like, when's it going to get me next? Okay. And I would keep myself going through reading and like articles and like constantly ruminating and things like that. So that was at the point where I thought that like, this is the best it's going to get. I'm living my life. I am going out for meals with friends. I am going on holiday. But you know what? It's still there and it's still hurting me. And now how I feel. So there are a few more layers after that, but how I feel today is, and this is why I'm explaining that OCD isn't gone. It's not cured, because there is no cure. My brain is my brain, like I have OCD. But how my OCD works now is, every now and then I notice that it like swings at me, and I could be like, I'm just like, oh yeah, okay. And I could be eating a sandwich. It's not like, it's more just like, oh yeah, you're doing that. Yeah, you're always doing that. Okay, whatever. And I'm just carrying on with what I'm doing. And that's exactly how it feels. Like, it doesn't interject into my day anymore. It will go, oh, Jade, do you want to be scared of that? That's scary. And I'm like, not even in a, it's not like I'm even humouring it. I'm just not bothered. I'm like, well, that wouldn't be scary. I'm not actually scared of that. Like I've said before about when you, in a previous video, when you're scared of the dark as a kid and then you're not scared anymore. How can you be made to be scared of the dark again? You can't. Someone could say, oh yeah, but it's really scary. You're not going to see anything. And there could be a monster there. And you'd be like, but I'm a grown up now and I'm not scared of that. And that is how I feel today, is I notice it here and there. And the tools I've developed through unconditional self and life acceptance and thinking more rationally and breaking down all my fears and worst case scenarios that I've done for a long time now. I don't do any of that work anymore because I don't really need to. Every now and then I have to remind myself just to keep rational. But that's more in like normal life stuff, because once the OCD suffering lifts, which it has for me, I noticed that normal real life stuff hit me like a ton of bricks, because I don't know about you, but I never had room for any of that stuff before. I didn't have room for normal life stuff. It didn't bother me because I didn't have the capacity. And then once all the anxiety was gone, it was almost like, oh whoa, this stuff's hard. Like little, petty life things, silly things would get to me. And I mean, for me, that's bliss. Like that's everything I've ever given anything for. Like there's nothing I wouldn't have given to be in the position I'm in now, which is to care about really unimportant things in life and get really mad. Like earlier, I went to a drive-through because my baby was screaming. She wouldn't have her nap. So I thought, right, I'll chuck her in the car. I'll go to a drive-through and I'll get a cake and a coffee and I'll just sit and do some stuff on my phone and just try and like have 5 minutes. And then I got to the drive-through and they're talking really loud. And I'm like, the baby's asleep. And then when I get to the window, they're like, oh, we don't actually have the cake you wanted. Did you want a different cake? And then talking really loud. And I'm like, the baby's going to wake up. If that baby wakes up, I'm going to... And then they don't have the cake I want. And then they do have a cake I want. And I'm like, yep, I'll have that. They take my payment. They've woken the baby. The baby's screaming. The coffee takes 5 minutes to get to me. And then they haven't given me the cake. They haven't even charged me for the cake. So I'm not getting cake. And I'm just trying to talk to you about how that bothered me is like a blissful thing. Like how that is my issue today is amazing to me. Like the fact I'm not sleeping very much because of my baby, that's my biggest problem in life. And that's bliss. That's just an incredible place to be. So what I've been working on now as my next step forward, now that OCD suffering is no more, what I'm working on is being more rational about life as a whole. And I feel like the rational thinking stuff has really helped me with all of life. If I've got a problem with a person in my life, it's like, well, why is it that everything has to be perfect in life? It's helped me a lot with parenting. So we've got 2 children now, and it's been an extremely difficult life situation. So OCD hasn't affected me with my second baby, which has been brilliant. I've been filled with love and joy every day, just at a base level. Angst from literally just being woken up 7 times a night a lot of the time has been very challenging. But I say to my husband every day, I'm like, I would do this for 30 years to not have to have 3 months of OCD suffering again. I could do this, no problem. It makes you very strong to go through this stuff. But again, for the rational thinking, I'm now working on using that. So I'm rereading the Albert Ellis, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable and The Myth of Self-Esteem. And I think I'm also going to read again Man's Search for Meaning, because those 3 are not really specifically about anxiety, but they're really good for perspective in life. So I find myself, whereas I'm not falling into any compulsive OCD problems, I do fall into irrational thinking where I'm like, oh, it's awful if this work doesn't go well with the client, or if this project falls through, or if my baby doesn't sleep for another month. I'm falling into those sorts of rabbit holes sometimes. So I'm just trying to work on continuing to grow as a person, having compassion for others. You know, unconditional other acceptance is useful when you're having difficulty in life, because it's like, well, other people are fallible, they make mistakes. Why do I need everyone around me to be perfect? I don't. And just carrying on developing these life skills. And so I suppose what I'm getting to is how life feels today, after, I would say, I think, being really upfront with you, I think that for 3 years I've been on the right path with what I needed to do in a real solid way for OCD recovery. And now I'm really starting to feel like just strong. And I in my last video, I said I'm 80% recovered, where now I'm not measuring it. I don't care. I don't really mind. There's no percentage. That's probably the difference this time. I couldn't tell you how recovered I am. And I might be still scared of a few things that maybe will pop up in the future, and I'll apply the tools again. You never know. So that's been amazing. But the biggest message that I always put forward is you have to do the work. There's no other way. I spent maybe 6 months here and there just doing basically nothing and giving up, and that's part of the process too, like disbelieving in the process, being really triggered by the process. Why is no one else doing this? You know, I can't find other therapists who agree with this process. And the thing I've learned is there's no disagreement with what works for OCD. Everything that I had in CBT with some great therapists was really spot on for my journey. But I'm just saying that the unconditional self and life acceptance and rational thinking was an additional layer that has really helped me to go even further than I could ever imagine. And I'm not sleeping at the moment, but I wake up at 4 a.m. sometimes with my, when my baby's just inevitably woken me again. And I'm like excited, like, oh, all the things I can do today. I hope I get time to do it. Like, what will I do during a nap? And maybe I can do this and maybe I can go there. And I'm like planning for the future, all the countries I want to go to, all the things I want to see. And there was a bit of a grief period in this journey, because I was just like, wow, I thought that I was doing the right thing by staying so locked up in my own prison, being so safe with everything. But it's just like, wow, look what I missed out on. All these places. I really want to go to like Tokyo, and I want to go to New York again, and I want to go to see lots of America, and I want to see, there's so many places I want to go to. And now that I'm not scared, it's really exciting, and that's something to look forward to for you as well. So, when you've got this fear and it's all consuming and everything is locked down, you can't do anything, you can't even go around the block. That's what I was like at certain times of the day, because I think I'm going to get triggered. And then once the fear is unlocked, it's not that, oh, I can now walk around the block, or I can pop to the shops without getting really scared. It's like the whole world opens up. And it's amazing, because it's like, if you're fundamentally not scared anymore, you can do whatever you want. And that just feels like so exciting to me. So I am just mega excited about life now and all the things I can do. And the next year is going to be quite difficult in terms of time because I have a baby who's very dependent on me and I'm not sleeping. But I'm applying rational thinking to that. It's not a very long, I live in a really lovely home. I'm really lucky. I've got a husband, I've got a family. It is really hard. I'm not taking away from that. It's very difficult. Aside from OCD, this is the most difficult challenge I've ever faced in my life. And I've had some difficulties to face. Not having a single moment to myself. I mean, right now, this video I've been trying to do for nearly a month. But luckily I've gotten all my jobs done today. I've got some childcare help here from my in-laws. And I thought, right, do it now or never. So I really hope that hearing from other people will help you to realise that you definitely can get to where I am. It does take a lot of work, and you've got to believe in the process and in yourself, and you've got to let nobody who's an outsider, put down what you're trying to do. Because I also found it difficult at times if there were people saying, well, I've never heard of unconditional self-acceptance. That's not the gold standard for OCD. And I would see, accounts suggesting it's not the right way to do it. And I did find that really, I'll be honest here, I found it really hurtful and it really affected me because I was like, I'm making such good progress and I'm really happy with how things are going. And I just can't imagine wanting to say something to someone else where they're doing really well and wanting to say, you're not doing as well as you think. I couldn't believe it. But, again, rational thinking, not everybody has to understand what I'm doing and how well it's been going for me. And I'm living life now and I'm really enjoying keeping in touch with all the people that have helped me along the way. Some amazing people I've met in my WhatsApp group. And again, that is not a place that's compulsive to anyone. It's a place of like-minded people who get on in life as well as along OCD. So yeah, I don't need advice and support anymore, but every now and then it's nice to chat to people who have, had a really nice bond with. And I really loved making all these friends and helping contribute back to the community. So that's been really nice. And yeah, if there's any videos that you would like me specifically to cover on this about my own journey, maybe there's something I've mentioned that rings true to you, please comment on the video because I'm happy to do some more videos of this when I get a chance. I'm just trying to picture how bad things were for me and what I would have wanted to hear. And it is that it is worth carrying on. It is worth fighting more. And I definitely felt how you're feeling. If you're, halfway along the journey to recovery and you're unsure and you're triggered as to if it's even worth doing, or I've been there, I've had all those feelings. And it really is worth it. You've got to find a way to jump into the fire, as one of the girls said to me once. You've got to jump in. You've got to really go for it. And it did feel like that sometimes. It felt like jumping off a cliff into the abyss. It was like doing exposures. I was dragging myself to them some days and disputing irrational beliefs. I could never see a way how it ever could be comfortable with these things. But again, it's not about agreement with the feared scenarios. It's about realising that no matter what happened in life, you could stand it. You could. So I hope this video is useful. And like I said at the start and at the end, please leave a comment if there's anything that you want me to cover specifically, and I will be happy to do so. All the best.